sideways of the sport of figure skating and maybe give you +5 GOE along the way. Let's introduce this week's hosts.
Hi, I'm Evie, and I made the stupid decision not to take any leave from my full-time job during the Olympics, and so I'm extremely fired up, but also ready to take a month-long nap.
I'm Kat, in a similar boat, except I decided to love myself, at least take a week off after the Olympics are over, so yay for self-care.
You really made a good decision with that. I feel like I need to go have a nice tropical vacation after this is all over.
Genuinely need to decompress after this. It feels like every single day has felt like 6 years.
And we're only two individual events in, and it feels like we've been here for months. So before we begin to talk about the ice dance event, we actually have an update to give you surrounding the doping case regarding Kamila Valieva. So on Sunday, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, or CAS, met for a hearing to determine whether or not the Russian anti-doping agency, or RUSADA's decision to overturn the ban they imposed on Kamila on February 8th after her samples taken on December 25th came back positive was justified. Unfortunately, they chose not to impose any sanctions on RUSADA, the ROC, or Kamila, and she was permitted to compete at the event, which began on Tuesday. Their reasoning for dismissing the case was due to the fact that she was a protected person, aka a minor, according to the World Anti-Doping Agency's code, and that heavy sanctions are not imposed or enforced for these people. They also cited the timing of the test results as the main factor for this ruling, that the wait time in between the sample being received and then tested was the cause of the interference in her possibly competing here. There's one thing in particular that stands out to me in this, and that's that Kamila getting a pass because she's a minor, when we've seen before that other governing bodies like the ISU don't care about age when it comes to enforcing these anti-doping rules. For example, Yeonam Kim of Korea, who incidentally is also at these Olympics, accidentally missed a doping test at JGP Yokohama in 2016, an event she competed at when she was only 13, 2 years younger than Kamila is now. She was unaware that she needed to be tested and was reprimanded by the ISU for doing so. Reading the disciplinary decision press releases for this case versus the one that we've currently seen at this Olympics gives you such strong whiplash, because you can clearly see that these athletes are being held to two entirely different standards over what's appropriate for a minor. Furthermore, off the back of this ruling, the IOC announced that if Kamila were to medal at these games, no medal or flower ceremony would take place, and if she were to qualify for the free skate, then an extra woman would also qualify, making it 25 instead of 24 qualifiers. This is all in the case that after CAS holds further hearings for the other violations, remember that this ruling is only about whether or not to reimpose her suspension, then any medals or placements Kamila receives here would be revoked. What's perhaps the most infuriating thing to read in this CAS media release about this decision, which we will add a link to in the episode description, is that the panel apparently considered fundamental principles of fairness and irreparable harm towards the athlete when making this decision. I would argue that permitting Kamila, whose name has been dragged through the mud through countless news cycles at this point, who's had to walk through the mixed media zone with her hood up as to avoid reporters berating her with questions, to seeing footage of her crying during practices when she struggled, it's not a decision made on the basis of whether or not she could be irreparably harmed by doing so. Suspending her and barring her from competition would at least give her a way to escape what must be a truly dizzying amount of scrutiny, which will only continue to get worse if she ends up medaling in just a few days. And to the other point that the panel considered, the principle of fairness regarding this resolution, I would argue that it isn't fair to anyone involved here. It isn't fair to Kamila, who is probably having one of the worst moments of her young life right now. But more importantly, it isn't fair to her competitors who have effectively had their Olympic moments tarnished by this whole affair. Those athletes who have competed clean, who deserve their Olympic moment, something that may only come once in a lifetime. Those other women who will not get their medals until months after the games actually finish because of court proceedings. I would argue that the only way in which this ruling is fair, the only people who truly benefit from all of this, are Kamila's coaching team. To the coaches of Sambo 70 and their ringleader Eteri Tutberetsi, it gives them a pass to continue pushing these literal children to their breaking points, giving them performance-enhancing drugs to maximize any and all potential they might have, and then abandon them as soon as they reach puberty or their bodies literally break. The New York Times investigated this issue and found reports that Kamila was taking 2 other heart medications, both of which are not banned by WADA, as well as the drug in question, TMZ, which she tested positive for. You cannot argue that a 15-year-old elite level figure skater could have a heart condition that would warrant her to take 3 separate medications for it and still be able to compete at the level that she does. That is fundamentally impossible. And in refusing to step up to the plate to impose even the barest minimum of sanctions in the name of athlete safety, the Court of Arbitration for Sport chose not to act. Until the situation is resolved, which may take months if not years, until sanctions are placed upon Sambo 70 and Ateri Tutberetsi and the full truth about this whole situation is revealed as to the extent of their doping of their athletes, this issue will persist and it's just not right. We'll continue to provide updates on this whole situation as it progresses through our Twitter, as well as in our further episodes covering the Olympics. So, the ice dance event! It's over! It happened! We've got medalists, new Olympic champions. Wow.
And in a way, did it feel like this ice dance event sort of just felt like the culmination of just everything? It just symbolizes what happened this entire quad.
Literally. I mean, it's really funny when you think about how the podium here is exactly the same podium that we had all the way back in 2019 at Worlds.
I was thinking that too. I literally thought that too. And it had a good chance of being the same podium of, like, Montreal Worlds if that had happened.
Yeah, exactly. Like, nothing much has really, like, all of the top teams have stayed kind of persistently in the top throughout the whole year. There haven't been really many shakeups. Like, obviously, last quad, we kind of had the, like, shakeup of Virtue and Moya coming back. It kind of threw things a little off balance. But now this quad has kind of just been, you know, obviously ignoring the disruption of COVID. It's kind of all just been the same storyline.
It really has been. One of the biggest factors in this quad, obviously, is the rise of the Ice Academy of Montreal, or GADWA. Given that 11 out of the 23 teams that were competing here, at least in the rhythm dance, and I believe 9 out of 20 in the free dance were from the same school. I was explaining this to my friends over call last night. Whoa, that's so many teams.
It's insane. Considering, like, you compare that to Pyeongchang, there were only 4 GADWA teams competing at that event. So going from 4 to, like, 11, and these are, you know, it's the Olympics. These are the top teams. Yeah, we talk a lot about, like, you know, how crazy packed that school is, but then you put it into perspective like that, and it's just like, yeah, nearly half the field of this Olympics all train at the same rink with the same coaches and the same choreographers. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I hope that some people this quad kind of realize that the oversaturation at that school is not going to help them, because once you have that many teams that are training together, I mean, obviously you want to be like training with the top teams, but there's also, like, you know, the level of attention and the amount that you can stand out among those teams that all plays a role in how well you get scored. So I really hope that some teams reconsider, at least go to different choreographers, or,
yeah,
you know,
especially when, like, you talk about, like, teams, especially that represent the same countries all training in the same rink, then you have to think about, like, the internal, how the internal politics of a school like that works. But, like, maybe with the fact that the Ice Academy of Montreal, they've opened up another school now. So now they have 2 different locations, and the other one, which is, you know, headed by Scott, where Carrera and Ponomarenko train. Maybe the fact that they're expanding means that they're going to get more coaches, more choreographers in their arsenal, so maybe that they can, you know, kind of work on providing their teams with more support rather than just have everyone squished in together at one location.
In the end, I think it's just the oversaturation of teams from one school that is kind of stifling some of the creativity that we see in ice dance. And honestly, I'm really hoping that there are some more, you know, the expansion of, like, more coaches, more choreographers in the field will help kind of rectify that stagnation.
But, like, we talked about, you know, obviously a lot of the top teams being from GADWA. One of the, like, biggest storylines of these last couple of years has been the constant kind of back and forth that we saw between Hubble and Donahue and Chalk and Bates, kind of for that, you know, that top US spot. You had, like, Chalk and Bates consistently either winning or coming in the second in 2019 at Nats. But then Hubble and Donahue went on to medal at Worlds in 2019 and then 2021.
For whatever it's worth, like, it seems that, like, Hubble and Donahue have been more successful with the international judges, whereas, you know, maybe the Federation or the U.S. judges seem to favor Chalk and Bates more. But I think that the problem with both of them has always been, like, their packaging. I mean, it's not just these two teams. It's a lot of the teams there is trying to find that right way to be packaged. The way that things played out, I can't say that I'm upset, but I've always loved Hubble and Donahue skating. I've always said that, like, you know, they skate so big, they're so fast, like, live, they're so impressive, but I mean, there's only so much that you can appreciate the skating if the programs don't do it for you, so...
I think that the real edge that they have, we'll talk about this more later, but like Hubble and Donahue definitely had the better set of programs this year in particular.
For sure. I mean, if they had to pick like a season to get it right.
I know, they really picked the right one to actually get some.
Not all of them did. Not all of them did.
Definitely not. And I feel like obviously we had that back and forth between them, but there were some like interesting storylines that came out of some other countries, the squad, like particularly Canada, where we had Piper and Paul, you know, kind of come up right at the start of the quad and cement themselves as like not only just like a medal contender for smaller events or like for Grand Prix, but like actually contenders for major medals like championships and then eventually worlds.
Yeah, and I remember because I was at Skate Canada in 2019 when do you remember like Piper's reaction when they got their scores like at Skate Canada? They beat Hubble and Donahue there. Like I think that was the moment where, or at least for me, that I thought, oh, okay, Skate Canada really is going for the Piper and Paul push here.
Yeah.
For a world medal, for maybe an Olympic podium. This is like the only field that they're competitive in at all. So
I really love seeing, especially because, you know, Piper and Paul have had such a long career together where they've kind of played, you know, second or third fiddle to other Canadian teams in the field, like Vachon Moyer and Weaver and Poget.
They've been around for a while.
Exactly. And seeing them come into their own here and, you know, really, you know, contend for those major medals has been really nice to watch, I feel.
Although I do also, I don't know, I kind of like lament the fact, I think everyone is a really, you know, everyone really fell in love with their Vincent program from the 2018-2019 season. And they've always been known for being the quirky team that did unique things. And I can't help but think that because they started contending for major medals after that season, especially when the field was pretty depleted. A lot of the top teams weren't competing a lot that season. And they thought that because Vincent was so well-loved, they kind of did a derivative version of that dance every season after, and they kind of lost that originality that made them super special, in my opinion. Unfortunately, this free dance is pretty forgettable. Yeah, I just kind of wish that they went back to their more fun programs.
Obviously, the problem is that, like, we had all these teams kind of rise up at the start of this quad, or, like, these major talking points come up, but then obviously everything kind of, ground to a halt, because obviously, you know, we are still living in a pandemic, which is, you know, not been fun. But like everyone in ice dance and everyone like in figure skating in general has been affected by the pandemic in terms of training. But like they had major disruptions in a lot of major training camps. Like I know that GADWA was shut down for a large period of time in like 2020. And obviously the Russian training camps kind of still kept going throughout the pandemic, throughout 2020 and 2021. And a lot of them were absolutely like ravaged by COVID.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the pandemic affected some teams more than others, depending on, you know, the amount of ice time that they can get, the rink access, and access to choreographers, having to do choreography remotely, coaching remotely even. Like, all of these things have an impact. I mean, even the top team, like, even Papadakis and Cicerone got COVID, and I, like, in the past 2 seasons, I feel like I barely see them.
They didn't go to Euros this year. They didn't go to Worlds last year. They went to the Grand Prix, but...
They went to the Grand Prix this year, right?
Yeah.
They basically did not compete the 2020 to 2021 season. You know, I honestly forgot because when I was watching the rhythm dance, I was like, oh, wow, like, we're on the last group already? Like, Papadakis and Cicerone are here. Like, and then I remembered, like, oh, right.
World standings.
World standings, and, like, they didn't compete. So
but yeah, everyone was like, especially last year at the end of the season, obviously barely anyone had been able to train at the level that they had been consistently at for the last couple of years. So everyone looked really rough last year at Worlds. But, like, I feel like the kind of standard we come to expect from this ice dance field, because it's kind of come back at this Olympics. Like, everyone seems to have gotten back into kind of their training groove now.
But, shall we just quickly go through the medalists?
Yes, definitely. Considering we've been talking for this long and haven't mentioned who got on the podium.
We have Gabriela Papadakis, Guillaume Cicerone, winning the gold, Victoria Sinitsina and Nikita Katsalapov from the ROC winning silver, and Madison Hubble and Zachary Donahue from the US getting on the podium, squeeze it in.
It's not that this Olympics ice dance event was boring to watch. It was just, again, very
predictable.
It was just, yeah. I mean, honestly, if you asked me back in 2019 or 2018, like, who I would expect to be on the podium here, I probably could have told you exactly this. And, you know, it's just not shocking, not surprising. I mean, you know, dance, you don't usually see giant changes in ordinals like in other disciplines. But it just really, like, it felt amplified here that this ice dance event in particular was very by the numbers.
Indeed. Yeah, it just feels like this ice dance was more or less just like a coronation for Papadakis Cicerone, who were posting massive scores for the last 4 seasons. It would have taken a major mess up for them to not win the gold, clearly. But, you know, I do want to point out that turning silver into gold has always, you know, there is a level of pressure that comes with that. And, you know, knowing the past Olympic demons, I don't even want to think about how many times they sewed Gabby's dress on.
Oh God, yeah. I can just imagine that the neck line of her dress in the rhythm dance was like, you know, safety pin sewed in completely.
No chances for that.
Like, there was some doubt, like, maybe, like, especially in 2020 when Sinitsina and Katsalapov won Euros over them, that there could be, like, a bit of a shake-up. But, like, after the team event happened, I was, like, really confident that, you know, Papadakis and Cicerone were going to win.
Team event did not help anyone this time.
No.
Really
no,
did not.
It did not.
At least in ice dance did not help anyone.
Pretty much, no. But you think about it, because, you know, yeah, Sinitsina and Katsalapov both skated both the rhythm dance and the free dance in the team event. And they kind of, you know, they had problems in the rhythm dance, and then their free dance score was, like, good, but it wasn't the level that they needed to, like, actually challenge what Papadakis and Cicerone could have put out. And then, like, all of the other teams also didn't really have dramatic increases. So it's just like, what kind of momentum are we setting in this team event? Not much, by the looks of it.
Pour one out to Nikita's back. Got bless his physio. I was terrified that at some point he was gonna drop Victoria. Like, in this past week, his back's not looking good. So I'm glad that he managed to survive. I was real worried when I saw that they were not doing any substitutions for dance. So I feel like, at least to me, past the top 5 teams or so, they kind of were struggling to place the team. They just kind of were like, oh, these teams are kind of around the same, so just put one after the other. Like, I mean, now that the free is in reverse order of the short or the rhythm dance, like, it feels like it just did the judges' work for them. They were like, well, if there aren't any major deductions, we'll just put you next up.
Yeah, it felt like they were just kind of squishing everyone together. Like, they had a couple people right at the front, and then everyone was just kind of, like, cramped into the same kind of scoring range. Because I think in the rhythm dance, you had, like, Chock and Bates, Stepanova and Buchan, and then, like, Piper and Paul, and Guinard and Fabry, all in the same, like, low 80s scoring. They're just kind of squished together in that same kind of area. And then you had like we had so many scores in the 70s, which was kind of surprising, I found. But like we talked about it a little bit in the team event episode about how obviously there was some choices about Fed sending certain skaters to the Olympics. Like obviously we talked about Team Coco coming here. Unfortunately, they didn't qualify for the free dance, but there were some other teams that were here that, especially at the start of this season, not even the start of the quad, but the start of this season, I don't think any of us expected teams like Davis and Smolkin to get to the Olympics.
In a way, yes, like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We did not expect them to be at the Olympics. Yeah, some of the scores that they got, I think that I don't think I've ever seen a team. This is like their international debut season, right? So the scores for them have been so wild and fluctuating like crazy. Like they scored over 80 in the rhythm dance at Warsaw Cup, right? They beat out like Kana and Dai, and they beat out Green and Parsons at Warsaw Cup. Like
they almost got 200 total points at Warsaw Cup, and that they're for a first year senior team in ice dance. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they had only competed at US Classic and Skate Canada, right? Like I think they got like 5th at Skate Canada.
Definitely not a large body of work to suggest a 200, you know, especially because I believe that they had the highest international like debut rhythm dance score of any team in the history of IJS. They got like a 75. It's crazy. You don't see that kind of rapid score increase from juniors to seniors in that kind of like couple of months span. I think everyone knows that, you know, Diana is a Terry Tutberidze's daughter, so there's a lot there to dissect.
A lot to be said for that. Yeah, explaining this saga, I have to say, just to my friends with the situation with Camila and Diana being here, and like trying to explain, you know, this whole situation sounds completely wild to an outsider. Like, you know, ISU has been doing those, like, explain figure skating to an alien, and I would just try to explain this to them and see how they react.
Impossible. It's just that, especially when you look at some of the other teams in the Russian field, like the Russian domestic field, they are clearly still at that kind of, you know, the very early senior level. You know, their skating skills haven't developed yet. They've got some cool lifts. Their programs aren't the best packaging-wise, but, like, you know, I guess their free dance isn't a terrible choice. Like, Moulin Rouge is a very safe option.
They still fall into the same junior pit traps that I think we've talked about before, where they pick something that's really overdramatic to try to compensate for the lack of interpretation. And it makes you feel more juniorish in the way that you're trying to force a team to skate up to this big music, but because their interpretation is not strong enough, then it falls, like, the program itself just falls flat.
And then you have, like, on the other hand, you know, obviously the last couple of years, there's always been the discussion around the Spanish ice dance spot, because there's usually only one at major events, and the constant battle between Smart and Diaz and Hurtado and Kaliavin. And it's just the constant back and forth that's been driving us all crazy, and the fact that they only ended up qualifying one Olympic spot last year really just sent so many of us over the edge.
That's so devastating. Honestly, they both deserve to go. I think that if you looked at the trajectory of the last quad, I think it was pretty obvious that the Spanish Federation was pushing Smart and Diaz over Hurtado and Kaliavin just based on their international scoring and, you know, going the head-to-heads. But they both deserve to go. I don't know if it's because the Spanish Fed was like, well, Hurtado and Kaliavin already got the last Olympics, so now you get to go. It's just like that.
Apparently they decided via, like, the aggregate scores that they, like, had throughout the season, and then they used Spanish nationals and Euros as the, like, main deciding factors. And, yeah, it was really close. Like, the total scores for across the events was really close between them, but Smart and Diaz managed to win out.
Yeah. I mean, this is the best set of programs that they've had this entire quad.
It feels like I feel really torn between it because like I can acknowledge the fact that Hurtado and Kaliavan are the obvious like pick for like the technical side of things.
Skate and hold, they're faster, yeah.
But I don't enjoy their programs as much. Like their packaging, I feel like isn't as memorable as Smart and Diaz. Like, and that's been like kind of consistent through the last couple of years. Especially this season, they definitely had the strongest set of programs over Sarah and Kirill. So I'm not at all surprised. But yeah, like you said, would have liked to have seen both of the teams here just honestly just to avoid all of the drama. If only they had qualified. Because they almost placed high enough at Worlds to qualify for 2 spots. I think they were 1 placement off doing that. So
yeah. Oh, curses. We could have had both. They both deserve... I really hope that Sarah and Kirill keep going, though. I think that... I don't know if Smart and Diaz have made any statements. I really hope that, you know, maybe we'll see the rise of more Spanish teams in the future. Qualify more teams. Don't have to deal with this lack of spots.
And I feel like also another thing that has to be said is, like, there were teams that obviously didn't make the Olympics. And one of them that when I first heard about all of this stuff going on, I was kind of shocked because, you know, there's the Lithuanian ice dance spot, which was earned by Alison Reed and Salius Ambrulovicius. Like, you know, they couldn't come here because Alison didn't get granted Lithuanian citizenship, even though she applied 2 separate times last year. Like, there was apparently no substance for her application to be granted based off special merit.
Really devastating. You know, working your whole life, you know, these past few years, like, it's been a hard quad for everyone. And, you know, with the singular goal of the Olympics in mind, like, it's really, really sad that they weren't able to make it.
Because they've been competing for Lithuania since, like, 2017, I believe, and, like, they finally managed to place high enough at Worlds last year to, like, secure that spot. Like, they didn't even have to go to Nebelhorn for it. They managed to get it at Worlds. You know, they qualified that spot for Lithuania, but unfortunately, that just, you know, all that work wasn't enough to grant Alison that citizenship. And so they sent another team who is a fairly new team, and unfortunately, they finished last in the rhythm dance, did not qualify for the free. And you just kind of think about what could have been, because I feel like Alison and Salius definitely could have qualified for the free if they were here.
Absolutely.
Shall we go into talking about the rhythm dance a little bit more?
Rhythm dance, yes. Evie, how do you feel about the theme that they picked this year?
Honestly, I was really excited when they first announced that they were going back to Midnight Blues and Urban Dance, because, like, I feel like there were a lot of really iconic programs the last time it was used in 16-17. Like, there were so many good programs that year. We had, like, the Shibs doing That's Life. We had Virtua Moya's Prince program. So I was really excited for this, especially considering it was the Olympics, you know, a big spotlight. I was really excited that the teams would kind of bring it and, like, have some really interesting programs. But
we already spoke about the GADWA hegemony and the lack of innovation in the choreography here. And it really stands out here, I think, because, you know, this program is a lot more technical. So there's already slightly less room for there to be, you know, huge variations. And it just really stands out, I think, in the rhythm dance.
Especially because we know for a fact that, like, GADWA has Sam Schuernard on their team, who's a dancer. And I know that a lot of the GADWA rhythm dancers use choreography by him. And I mean, when you're choreographing for that many top teams, it's understandable that you're going to run into problems with not sticking too close to a certain formula, or making sure that some teams don't have, you know, similar feels to others. There's just so much crowding in that one rink. And, like, to be fair, they did like vary the styles of dances that, like, the teams did. Like, some teams did, like, more disco, some teams did, like, rock, you know, they got a more diverse set of music. But still, I just felt like so many of the rhythm dances this year were really just kind of unmemorable, which is really upsetting because, again, this theme, it could have really shown another side to ice dance that we haven't seen at the Olympics before. Like, we haven't had a theme like this before.
Yeah, I can't remember who was on the commentary. I think it was maybe Tessa, who was saying about how hip-hop in urban style can be difficult to translate to the ice just because, like, the wide variety of, like, arm movements. I mean, these ice dancers obviously are, like, some of the most coordinated people ever, having to, you know, do all of their fancy footwork as well as the arm movements. Even then, it can be really, really tough to execute properly and execute well, which is why sometimes some of the teams, they're executing the arm work really well, but then there's nothing going on in the feet, and so like that's just defeats the whole purpose of ice dance, and especially in a more technical program, it just doesn't work.
I felt that with like La Joie and La Gare, their rhythm dance, their Funky Town rhythm dance, where I noticed that their like upper body movements are really dynamic and really snappy, but there was basically nothing going on in their lower bodies that really quite, like, it was distracting a little bit. Even though that program I feel is still really fun.
Right.
They really sell it. But yeah, I totally get what you mean by that.
Yeah, it's just the movement repertoire sometimes, like, doesn't translate as well. But I think that given the right choreographer, maybe going to an actual urban street style choreographer, you know, at least there would be more creativity.
And of course, there's the obvious problem at the moment that, like, sourcing those kind of choreographers might be hard because of COVID, not being able to get them, like, to work with the teams in person. Maybe they might only be able to do it. Really
makes you want to cut some slack to some of these teams just because it is really hard to find choreographers and find time. And going to Sam Chouinard is just basically out of convenience. It's like, well, they're already at my school. Why do I need to get a private tutor?
Yeah, exactly. And that's not to say that there aren't good programs in this field for the rhythm dance. Like, I really like Hubble and Donohue's Janet Jackson rhythm dance. I feel like that's probably my pick of, like, the best rhythm dance this season.
Yeah, obviously, they're iconic knee slides.
The amount of control that you need and the power in your knees and, like, all of your leg muscles to be able to get that low. Crazy.
And the amount of ice coverage that they get just from that one edge, man. Really impressive.
And, like, even right from the beginning of the program, like, it really grabs your attention right away.
Although the moaning part in the middle, like...
I know, yeah.
I had some friends, like, asking me, like, is there moaning?
Like, I feel like their team event skate was probably the cleaner one out of the two. It was a little bit unpolished in the individual. They didn't get quite all of their levels, I believe. But it's still a really excellent program for them. And again, like you said earlier, if they picked a really good season to have two really good programs.
Yeah. Do it for the Olympics, guys. Do it for the Olympics.
I feel like the tech panel in the rhythm dance was pretty harsh throughout the first three groups, especially. It was noticeable, like, barely anyone got above a level 2 in either the pattern or step sequences. There were lots of level 1 patterns in particular, which, you know, and it kind of stayed that way throughout the event. Like, there was some, obviously the scores did get significantly higher in the last two groups of the rhythm dance, but I feel that was more an effect of the judges going buck wild on GOE rather than the levels. You know, especially, the levels at this event, I feel like were fairly consistent with what you would expect, rather than, say, like, a Worlds 2019, where the tech panel went completely crazy and basically gave everyone clean levels.
It's like, it's a level 4 for you, and you get a level 4.
No, it was very much, it was a little bit more scrutinized here, which, you know, is good. We like it when levels are called. Hooray. But yeah, it's more that the judges were kind of going crazy on the grade of executions here.
That's basically where you find your variation. It's just like the crazy PCS and the crazy grade of execution. It's also where most of the politicking comes out.
The politicking, yeah.
Yeah, in ice dance, basically, you just politic based on, like, giving higher PCS and higher GOE, even to elements that don't get, like, all the levels.
And we will definitely go into later on.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, especially when you look at the top two placements in the rhythm dance. When you look at Papadakis and Cizeron and Sinitsyn and Katsalapov. Like, I agree with where they ended up, the scoring for both, like, obviously, Papadakis Cizeron scored a world record on the rhythm dance. Good for them. But, like, to the extent that they scored, like, the amount of 10s on their protocol sheet, the amount of 4s and 5s on their protocol sheet, was it really warranted? It's hard to say.
Yeah. I mean, I am now curious to see how they plan on scoring the future team. How's any team gonna touch them? They've already basically maxed out, right? For the most part, they've completely maxed out the total, the scores in both programs.
And it's not that I disagree with them winning the rhythm dance or winning overall, because I do think that out of the skates that we saw at this event, they were definitely the cleanest. But I feel like with the rhythm dance, especially when it comes to if teams have similar levels, then at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to personal preference over what you like more in terms of skating style. Like, Papadakis and Cizeron have really great knee bend and make everything look super easy versus, like, Sinitsyn and Katsalapov or even, like, Hubble and Donahue, who are more, like, you know, big sweeping movements and speed and, like, really long lines and things like that.
And I mean, I really appreciated that they went for, like, whacking and tutting for their rhythm dance. Their greatest strength is trying to, like, show off their lines and their fluidity and their lightness, and this program is definitely not in their comfort zone. A lot more sharp movements, and they still pulled it off pretty well. So, you know, props to them.
And I feel also like with Sinitsyn and Katsalapov's rhythm dance, I'm not a fan of the music that they chose. I'm not really a fan of Nikita's shirt in the rhythm dance. You know, that's a choice, a costume choice. But I feel like the choreography and, you know, it really showed off just how good their basic skating skills are. It really highlighted their strengths in that respect.
Feels like everyone has been saying that, you know, Vika has had the biggest glow up in skating skills in the past couple of years. And it's true. Like, she's definitely, like, one of the best ice dancers in the field right now. I gotta say, you know, their free dances are never, like, they kind of always go for the same style of, like, classic free dance. But this one honestly kind of grew on me a little bit as the season went on. I am not exactly sure why. Also, there's, like, this part in the middle where they do the back crossovers, like, up the midline, and it kind of, like, reminded me of, like, Grishik and Platov. And I'm like, you know what? This is actually kind of nice.
I feel like that this free dance is probably the best one that they've had in the quad.
For sure.
That being said, I'm not a fan of the choreographic step sequence.
This choreographic steps! Oh my god. Okay, I laugh every single time they happen, but it's just like the music cut. It's the music cut just suddenly, like, cutting to this, like, fast, like, electronic violin style from this, like, you know, very classical.
When I first heard it, I knew that the free dance was Rachmaninoff. But when I first heard that particular section, and especially with the way that they were moving their arms in the choreography for that, I thought that they switched to river dance, because that was the vibe that I was getting with the violin, you know, and the kind of, you know, the arm movements they were doing in the choreographic step sequence. I was just like, did we have a sudden? Are we an island now? I'm very confused. And, like, speaking more on the free dancers at this event, I feel like, you know, Papadakis and Cizeron, I don't think that this was their strongest free dance of this quad, at least in my opinion, from, like, my personal taste. I think that my favorite one that they had in the last couple of years was
the duet.
Yeah, exactly, duet. It's just Sunday afternoon. I feel like that was, and I'm not I've said many times, I'm not particularly a huge fan of their skating style. However, that free dance really did, you know, show off the best in their skating. But I do appreciate that they went for a tango here. It's a bold choice. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it did. They had a little bit more skating and hold, which was kind of nice. But yeah, it feels like they definitely did want to still default to something that was more on the flowing and lyrical side. I mean, tango is not the most lyrical, but they still picked, like, a rather slow tango so that they could still get those, you know, those lines and extensions in.
I believe that they described it, or someone described it, as a deconstructed tango, and I would like someone to explain to me exactly what that means, because...
Yeah, I'm not sure, but mostly just because tango is very much fancy footwork. You know, like, very much fancy footwork and in hold, and there's, there's not that much of it in their free dance. So it's like they're doing contemporary style dancing to tango music, which, honestly, I don't know what to say. Like, it's the style that works for them. Does it need to be rewarded to the high heavens like they got? I don't know. I don't think so.
I mean, yeah, looking at their protocols after the fray, they didn't get a single grade of execution point below a 4. Everything was in the 4s and 5s. Which, like looking at that, am I surprised? Absolutely not. I know what to, I've come to expect this kind of thing. This is what the judges have been telling us throughout this entire quad. That Papadakis and Cizeron are the ultimates. They are the top of the field.
There's room for an increase, I guess, in base value. But the GOEs, they clearly tried, for so many of these elements, even if they take out one of the scores, right? It's still gonna be 5s across the board. But for the curved lift and for the twizzles, they got perfect. Honestly, when I watched those twizzles, I thought, whoa, those are the best twizzles I think I've ever seen them done. So
they were really, really
they were
nice,
really good, especially because Gabby in particular, used to really wobble a lot on the twizzles. They used to be a little dicey.
They've definitely stabilized that. Yeah,
stabilized, sync, and in sync, great ice coverage, and close together. So I honestly thought that those twizzles were the best they'd ever done.
But even if you look at the PCS that they got in the free dance, just looking at the protocol sheet, they got only 9.75s and 10s, and they got a perfect 10 in composition. Their total PCS was 59.40, so 0.6 off a perfect PCS score. What kind of message does that send to the rest of the field?
Yeah, how are they gonna score the rest? Again, there's more to be desired in terms of base value, but who is going to be the team that can even approach that with the maximum base value? And I don't even know. That's the only way that the world record's going to be broken, is someone approaching those PCS with higher base value.
And we talk about free dancers and the programs that we've seen here, but I feel overall, the whole field has kind of been moving towards kind of replicating that GADWA Montreal style, the more lyrical style programs with significantly less kind of skating and hold. And overall, decrease in difficulty.
But then you see the teams being scored like that, and it's just yeah, I want some of that.
Yeah, of course. I'm not knocking that decision that so many teams have chosen to go with these kind of programs, because it's obvious that those programs are the ones that are being rewarded more by the judges. So, of course it makes sense that you see that kind of shift in the field.
There needs to be some sort of judging overhaul, which I don't even know how to describe, because it's not gonna happen. I know that I'm just putting that out into the ether and it's never gonna happen, but
absolutely not. I've lost faith in the ISU and the system as a whole to actually have the want to fix itself.
The thing is that in theory, I think deep down, I think that the scoring system can be implemented in a way that is more fair, but it's just not being used that way. Even the same thing in singles, which having these cues and edge calls and under rotations, etc. Calling these things there is a way to, especially with the quad revolution, there is a way to implement it so that, even if you do get the higher base value and you ding them for the under rotation, and then you just subtract a bunch of GOE, it's that, that would at least be more fair than, a skater doing an under rotation or a borderline jump on a quad and then just giving them massive GOE just because they did it,
Yeah, especially with obviously the last couple of years. At the start of the squad, we had the change from +-3 to +-5 GOE. I feel like ice dance has been the discipline that's kind of been affected the most in regards to the way that the scoring has kind of shifted. Obviously there's been dramatic ways that the scoring for +5, -5 is affected singles and pairs. But you look at the ranges that the majority of the top teams are being rewarded in GOE, and all of them are getting 3s, 4s, and 5s when, even if the levels themselves aren't great. Like, it doesn't matter if you score a level 1 or 2 in a step sequence, because you're going to get the high, if you're from the right federation or you have that, you know, reputation behind you, you're going to get the really high GOE that's going to balance it out anyway. It's why you see some teams with, like, that struggle getting the levels still scoring high, because you still see them getting the crazy GOE.
Ice dancing in particular, because politicking is so prominent in the ice dance field, that sometimes, like, the scoring just feels a little bit more incomprehensible sometimes. Incomprehensible, yet still predictable, which is how I would describe ice dance scoring, really.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. I feel like, I don't know when it was, which year we did it, but, like, I vividly remember a few years ago talking about how if the ISU really wanted to fix ice dance scoring, or, like, they wouldn't change the grade of execution, they would just change the way that levels are scored and increase the difference between each level. Because right now it's only, like, for most levels, it's only like a 0.5 to 1. And, like, imagine the difference that could make, especially in like the rhythm dance, when, you know, you've got the pattern dancers. If you like, say, increase the differences for, like, to, like, maybe 3 points, like 3 or 4 points between each level, imagine the difference in standings that we would get in each segment just based off the levels. Because levels, if the judges are accurately awarding them, which is a whole nother can of worms, you know, you have to rely on the fact that the tech panel is actually doing their job, which sometimes they're not. That's way more objective, like, on a base level than grade of execution or PCS will ever be, because it's, you know, it's concrete. You have a way to count steps and turns to award a level, versus the judging panel giving grade of execution arbitrarily or based off the GOE chart. Like, you have the tools there to give an accurate score for a level that could foreseeably significantly change the standings in one segment of the event. And they're not doing it. They're just instead decided to boost the amount of GOE you could give a skater. And that's why we've seen the increase in the scores over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and then obviously the PCS scoring as well. The PCS scoring feels even more like, I almost don't even want to look at them ever. I don't think anyone ever talks about PCS anymore, because it's just kind of like, oh, well, all the ice dancers basically get all around there somewhere.
It's honestly, like, it's almost worthless to look at PCS now.
Right.
You look at it, it's rarely ever representative of what we actually see on the ice.
That's what I was saying. Like, I don't ever see anyone talk about ice dance or PCS anymore, because it's just, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, you think about the way that the scoring is trended this quad, and you think about, obviously we said that it's going to be basically impossible for anyone to beat Papadakis and Cizeron's world records, like, foreseeably in the next couple of years.
I will be so curious if someone manages to do it, because right now it's just like, who?
Exactly. At the moment, there's basically, we haven't seen anyone come close to it. Like, I guess Sinitsyn and Katsalapov have come close, but they haven't gotten to the same degree of perfect, you know, scores that the French have. But, like, you think about other teams in the field that have kind of risen throughout these last couple of years. I think, like, Fear and Gibson are a really good example of the fact that, you know, even if you don't have, you know, they're not exactly technicians. Their skating skills aren't as strong as some of these other teams. They consistently don't hit their levels in the step sequences and the patterns as well as some of these other teams. However, they're still scoring quite high in both segments, just purely on the basis that their GOE is usually pretty high, and because their reputation has gotten better over the last couple of years, they're also getting that PCS bump. So they could very well become serious contenders in the next couple of years as, like, the field around the top kind of clears out, just on the basis that they're getting that reputation scoring and that GOE that's, you know, representative of that reputation. It's just, and it doesn't make sense. I really like their programs most years, but I do not agree with the way that they are scored most of the time, because it's just not representative of the level of skill that they're currently at. Like, they definitely are a team with potential, but at the moment the judges are rewarding them to the point that there's no real need for them to actively invest in improving because they're already getting those scores, they're already getting those placements.
And it's just going to be more of the same. Like, skaters take feedback from the judges and what the scores they're getting are. And if the scores are in the ballpark of, like, what they want, why would they change anything? You know, like, you know what they say, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So
exactly. And there's, like, yeah, there's no incentive for the ISU to really change the way that dance is scored, especially with the, like, the main federations in power in the ISU that are, like, benefiting from these trends in scoring. I don't see them without, like, substantive pressure from, like, smaller federations, but that's never going to affect any change in the ISU, I feel. It's just going to kind of be a mess until, like, something inevitably boils over and they realize that, oh, hey, we've been awarding everyone way too higher scores, we need to press the reset button, or something like that.
What else is there to say? That's literally the predicament that we're in.
It's sad that the scores are like this, that, like, ice dance as a discipline is fundamentally broken in terms of scoring, and there's foreseeably no way that they're actually going to fix it. As a fan of the discipline, it's really sad to see.
Yeah, I just hope that someone will break through this scoring haze, this choreography stagnation, just everything. Like, I think ice dance clearly needs an overhaul.
Yeah, and it's sad, especially thinking about this season, because, like, I know we've had really good programs this quad. Like, some of the free dancers in particular this quad have been really strong from a lot of the top teams that we've seen at the Olympics. Like, obviously we spoke about Vincent from Piper and Paul, but there's also, like, the, you know, Fearon Gibson's disco free dance from 2018-19. Imagine that having an Olympic moment. That's a program that deserved an Olympic moment,
yes,
I feel.
Absolutely.
Even, like, Guinard and Fabry, their Space Oddity program, Stepanova and Buchan's Beth Hart.
Am I the one? One of my faves.
Even, like, Chock and Bates bringing back their Fever program. That would have been great. I would have even taken the Canadians doing Spanish Caravan again.
We really had it good in 2018, 2019. I gotta say, thinking back on it, we actually had so many great programs that season.
We really did. I think we kind of took it for granted.
We absolutely did. You know, I remember thinking, like, even the Tango Romanticas, I kind of missed them. Even some of the musicals, man, like, they're kind of campy, but, like, you know, I feel like the public could have, like, bopped along to them at the very least.
But there's still, like, there was still some free dances this season that I personally enjoyed.
Yes.
I liked, especially here, I really liked Stepanova and Buchan's Romeo and Juliet free dance.
Uh-huh.
Because, like, obviously they've had a significant rise over this quad, really becoming top European contenders. And obviously this was their first time going to the Olympics because they unfortunately had to miss out in 2018. But, like, honestly, when I first heard they were doing Romeo and Juliet, I was kind of a little disappointed just because I was like, okay, they're picking something safe for the Olympic year. But I feel like with the specific route that they went with their packaging and the music choices, like the music cut they went, they really managed to make it their own.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of like where I was talking about how juniors pick really dramatic stuff like Moulin Rouge, or like Romeo and Juliet's another one that a lot of juniors like to do because it's like big music that they don't have to like do a lot of interpreting for. But this one feels like slightly more subtle. It's not the big standout. Even like Stepanova and Buchan did do Moulin Rouge, right, before. It wasn't like super duper flashy or anything. And I kind of liked that like subtlety to it. It's like, it's still Romeo and Juliet, but yeah, definitely felt like they put their own spin on it.
One of my favorite free dances here at the Olympics, because I hadn't really seen Turkler and Vesluis's free dance much this year. That opening lift that they have right at the start of the program, it's a stationary lift into a rotational lift. That's crazy. Like the amount of like core strength you need to go from a stationary to rotational instead of the other way around is insane. And the fact that they do it so stably.
Absolutely. It's so great. And especially since their free dance is extremely floaty and lyrical and just very, very light is like their style, and still being able to pull off. I mean, we didn't even talk that much about the lifts this past quad, just being very like simple positions and holds, but being able to pull off such a difficult and technical lift, even, though their program is still this like lyrical, beautiful, gorgeous program. They deserve props.
And they're the first Finnish dance team to actually qualify for the Olympics since like 1994. So good for them. And the fact that they were both previously single skaters as well is a nice little fun fact about them.
And oh my god. I mean, we got to talk about Wong Lu, right? Like,
Us talk about them? Never.
I mean, I love them already, and I have a soft spot for the piano guys, and I love Kung Fu piano. So I was like, oh, this is brilliant for me. This is a choice made for me. And I just really love that program and the way it builds. And I'm so glad that, you know what, we bag on skaters for using the same lifts all the time. But when you have an iconic lift like that, that's so difficult. And especially with like Shinyu's like broken hand from 2 seasons ago, and they're still doing it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. Bring it back every time.
Considering they took it out last year, when they were still dealing with those injuries, and they replaced it with like a lift of similar difficulty still, but just seeing it back here, like literally during the team event when I watched the free dance, I was very emotional to begin with because, they didn't get to skate the free dance at Pyeongchang at all, either in the team event or the individual, and they got to skate it twice here. So already close to tears. But then as soon as they got to the straight line lift, I was just tears, instant waterfalls. I was crying my eyes out because I was just like, they, not only are they having like the skates of their lives out here on home ice with a really, a great crowd for, the crowd has been really receptive to their home skaters, in the last couple of events, which has been really nice to see. But like, just seeing them return to that lift, return to that form had just got me so emotional.
Right. Yeah. They really have had a lot of struggles. I mean, they had to leave Canada basically and train full time in China. So their coaches could really only get to them, late at night or early in the morning. And so they're one of those teams that have been really, really impacted by the pandemic. Same with the choreography. Like, they had to do all their choreography remotely. So the fact that they were able to pull it out and make, like, 4 great performances here at the Olympics on home ice.
Yeah, they should really be proud of themselves. And, hey, it definitely sounds like that they're planning on skating and continuing to skate.
I really hope so. I hope that this next quad will give more opportunities to the Chinese ice dancers and kind of push that field, because it's really like emotional for me seeing that like China has an expanding ice dance field, because for a long time Chinese skaters have always been kind of derided for being like emotionless and expressionless and like be lacking the artistic side of like skating. But we have ice dancers that are competitive, and that's super cool. And like, I honestly really like Guinard and Fabry's Atonement free dance. I know it's not for everyone, but I think that they're the only ones that can pull off being the schmaltzy team. Like, they're married. And I think that they're just like adorable, and they're amazing skaters. And yes, they should probably have a green dress. Probably would have made the program more iconic, but I honestly think that is, and then they put the Sparrow. They put the Song of the Sparrow at the end. So
that is, I love that piece of music so much. I agree that like I'm also a really big fan of this free dance. I'm surprised that so many people seemingly aren't big fans of it.
People find them kind of boring sometimes. I mean, maybe I get it, but maybe because I've seen them live a couple of times, I'm always so impressed whenever I see them live that I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. I reconsider the thought that they are boring, like, because they're so impressive when you watch them skate live. Yeah, and I really hope that they must be sticking around, right? Because the next Olympics are in Milan. So I don't
know. I mean, they're both in their 30s now. Would
they are both in their 30s. They are both, but the Italian ice dance field is also wide open.
This is very true. Yeah.
So they have an opportunity to go and compete and like Barbara Fusarpoli and Maurizio Margalio were in Torino, right? I mean, what happened there was kind of tragic, but I feel like that could be like a small full circle moment for them to go and compete. And then we got to talk about, I really love Hawaii Baker's Japan free dance too. For me, Hawaii Baker, I have always just had a soft spot for them. I'm so glad that they really, really pulled it out these last two competitions, the US Nats and the Olympics. Like these two have had such an up and down this quad, right? The ice dance field was super open in the beginning of 2018. Like the field was so open in the beginning of the 2018 season, and so they kind of lucked their way into Grand Prix final because they won NHK and got fourth in France, I think it was. But because they were one of the teams that kind of like migrated to GADWA in the beginning of the quad, they kind of got drowned out at every other competition, and they got drowned out by the other two ice dancers. Like the ice dance field in the US is pretty big. And then with Caitlin's concussion, and they had like a whole bunch of other health issues, they haven't really been able to compete a lot, so they kind of lost like all their momentum. And the few times that they actually did compete, they kept messing up things, and so they weren't able to like seize any momentum. So there was a lot of question now. Like Hawaii and Baker were always that solid number 4 team when the Shibs were around, and number 3 team with the Shibs gone in the US, and it was kind of like a question of like, okay, are they actually going to, are they gonna like falter? Are they gonna lose that solid number 3 spot to a different team? And they delivered when it counted, and I'm really glad that they were able to make the Olympics here. So, and they did really well too.
Definitely. I feel like that the next couple of years for them, if they continue to skate, which I'm positive that they're probably going to stick around, they're both pretty young, that like this next couple of years will be really interesting to see how they track both internationally and nationally, because obviously Hubble and Donahue are going to be retiring. That's leaving, a significant gap in the top of the US field.
Yeah, Green and Parsons are going to be there to chop at
they're definitely going to be at the heels of Hawaii and Baker in the next couple of years, or at least, or even surpassing them. Just seeing the kind of changes that the field could undertake in the US dance field with the amount of, with the retirements, we're not sure if Chock and Bates are going to be retiring at the end of the season. They haven't made any official announcements, but considering both their ages and the injury problems that they've had in this past year with like they've been dealing with like back spasms, things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if they only stuck around for maybe another season or two. I personally don't see them going to the next Olympics. Even though I think Scott was trying to convince Evan to go to his 5th Olympics or something. With Hawaii and Baker, with Green and Parsons, we've got that kind of question of how the US dance field is kind of going to look in the next quad. I feel like we haven't had this much of there's a significant gap that needs to be filled, and it'll be interesting to see which top team rises to the occasion to kind of fill that gap.
I mean, Green and Parsons have set themselves up like perfectly, winning 4 continents and coming super close to. They beat Hawaii and Baker in the rhythm dance at US Nats. So
it's funny when you think about the fact that Hawaii and Baker won 4 continents in the last Olympic year, and now Green and Parsons won 4 continents in this Olympic year.
Yep.
So we're, and now we're talking about them and comparing them.
Yep, setting themselves up perfectly, I'd say. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people were arguing, even some of us here at ITL were like arguing that Green and Parsons should have gotten one of the Olympic spots.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have been fine either way, but I do have a more sentimental soft spot for Hawaii and Baker. I mean, Green and Parsons are only like a 2-year-old like team right now, right? They're super new. But like they're like super impressive. I mean, I watched them at their first Grand Prix in Skate America, and I was like completely blown away by how good Caroline was, because I was not sure. I had never really seen her. She was only 16 at the time, and I hadn't really seen her compete before, and I was really blown away by the maturity of her interpretation at such a young age.
Yeah. And talking about like other potential teams in the US field, you've also got like Carrera and Ponomarenko, who have kind of had a rough go of it this year.
Well, another team that I have a tragic soft spot for. I
mean, yeah, they've had a bit of a weird year. I mean, they're currently training at the second location of the Ice Dance Academy in Montreal with Scott Moyer. And I know that their rhythm dance has made the rounds quite a bit in the last couple of months. Their bat dance, rhythm dance. Not necessarily in a good way. It's a little polarizing.
Yeah, I just, I don't know if that was Scott's decision or was their decision or their choreographers. Like, I'm just like, I just really hope that Scott has better taste than these programs suggest. And maybe I'd give it, this is like his first season really as a coach, so I'll give him a pass.
Especially because they have never really been the strongest team in terms of levels and on the technical side of things, but their scores in particular this season, I don't know if they're indicative of like their training situation, which hasn't been great over the last couple of years because of COVID. They really took a dip, and that's why they were never really considered competitive for that Olympic spot this year. But obviously, there's a new quad approaching. They're both still a really young team, so they have that potential. And again, if, depending on how their coaching situation goes, depending on if Christina can actually still get her US citizenship, because I believe that she still doesn't have it.
I feel really bad for their citizenship situation. I also wonder if, that Tanith and Charlie have started like their Michigan Ice Dance Academy too. I'm really curious to see now whether the ice dance field will start migrating over there and what that's going to look like, what their coaching and packaging and just in general style is going to be if they end up having some top teams training over there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're brand new, so who knows?
Might take a little bit to establish themselves, yeah.
But, I mean, what better time to do it than in the beginning of an Olympic quad? But it really does suck that, like, especially for some of the junior teams, they've had very little chances to compete these past 2 seasons.
I know.
The COVID affecting the Junior Grand Prix. Even now, Junior Worlds is being pushed back. This is really, really harmful to the junior teams who already don't really have that many chances to get international competition time. So it's just really unfortunate.
Of course, we had the Junior Grand Prix this year, but you have to think about the fact that all of the events took place in Europe. So there was obviously the problem of traveling for some teams that either couldn't afford it or didn't want to take the risk of traveling internationally right now during the pandemic, which is totally understandable. You also had Japan, who didn't send any of their skaters to any of their Junior Grand Prix, and so none of their skaters or teams got any experience this year. And the juniors really for their international season only have the Junior Grand Prix and then Junior Worlds every year. So hopefully the ISU will actually be able to hold Junior Worlds in May, like they're planning to with the postponement, because it's going to be really detrimental to those skaters if they're not going to be able to get that experience. Obviously, they need to hold this event in the safest way possible, and Omicron is obviously, interfering with that. But the junior skaters deserve this time on the international stage, especially, the junior ice dances. We always say that junior ice dance is the best and most valid discipline in figure skating. That is still very true. And I very much miss getting to watch a lot of it, especially in the last year, because obviously working full time and European time schedules for events are not good for Australia. Yeah. So I've been able to watch very little junior ice dance this year, which sucks.
Yeah. The junior ice dancers, honestly, God bless them, bringing some of the creativity back.
And that's not to say that there aren't teams still bringing creativity to the field. Obviously, we have some of the younger teams that were at this Olympics that were really bringing new things to it. Obviously, one of our top favorite junior teams from the last couple of years was Kazakova and Revia from Georgia, and now that they made the transition to senior, and they made it to the Olympics here, and that so good to see them.
Honestly, it just feels so weird because it felt like 2 seasons ago we were seeing them everywhere. They were doing both junior and senior events. So, they competed constantly, and then ever since COVID, it's just, haven't seen them at all. So I was just whoa, it's, my first time seeing them in such a long time. But they've had, issues with, injuries and stuff, right?
Yeah. And then they've had training issues due to COVID. They've been through a lot. They basically skipped the entirety of last season.
I mean, they weren't the only one, but it just felt so jarring to like see them so much and then not at all.
But they came back this season. They went to Nebelhorn. They scored the spot for Georgia for ice dance. Unfortunately, I feel like and this is probably just due to the lack of training time, the lack of international competition experience they've had in the last year. I feel like their skating in general has kind of declined in quality. But again, I'm not going to hold that against them just because of their circumstances. It's completely understandable that they've gone through that kind of shift. But even through that, they still have like really interesting program choices and really fun elements. Like they have some of the coolest choreographic like elements and lifts in the entire field, I feel.
Yes, yeah.
Like they have this really cool lift right at the start of their free dance where Maria's like suspended in a stationary lift, but they're both like, she's holding onto Gregory's arms like behind her back. They're like crisscrossed, and like I just looked at it and like the amount of core strength she must have to be able to keep herself in that position while spinning. Oh my god, I could never.
Yeah, and I really hope that they keep working and they keep growing and they can make the next Olympics. They're so young. They have a bright future. So
they definitely do. It's just a matter of them getting that experience, and then, now that competitions are on more often and they can hopefully make it to more of them, that they can continue to grow as a team. Because, they are still very young for a dance team. So that's the ice dance event.
Yeah. Overall, it was an event. Not only that, but I feel bad that, like, a lot of their Olympic moments have been kind of overshadowed by, the doping scandal that's kind of playing out. Like, the press conference was literally an hour after the free dance ended, so.
I mean, a lot of people, I feel like, in general, like, ice dance isn't the most popular discipline for people to watch anyway. Right. A lot of people don't have the same emotional attachment to the discipline as they do for others, and, like, I totally get that.
Yeah.
But, definitely having that kind of dark cloud of the looming news over the top of the free dance definitely distracted from everything.
For sure.
Like, especially you had like the press conference for the medalists literally happening as the Court of Arbitration for Sport ruling was given out. Like, that was happening concurrently. So everything was just all over the place. But like, again, this competition was quite predictable in the sense that it was very representative of the discipline that we have seen played out through the last couple of years. So it's still exciting to think about what the next season will bring, because there is going to be a lot of wiggle room at the top with how many retirements we're expecting. And I'm interested to see who's going to like step up to the plate in each respective federation. Like, I feel like the Grand Prix, especially next season, is going to be really interesting for ice dance. At least I hope it's going to be really interesting.
It'll be wide open again.
Exactly. I feel like I'm looking forward to see who takes that and runs with it for their momentum for the rest of the quad. So, thank you for listening. We hope to see you again for our next episode, which will be about the women's event coming out soon. Because, we're recording this the day before the women's event is starting. So, it'll come. It'll be coming soon.
Thanks to our transcribing and quality control team, Evie for editing, as always, and Gabb for our graphic designs.
If you want to get in touch with us, then please feel free to contact us via our website, inthelowpodcast.com, or on our Twitter. You can find our episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify.
If you enjoy the show and want to help support the team, then please consider making a donation to us on our Ko-fi page. We would love to give a huge thank you to all the listeners who've contributed to our team thus far. You can find the links to all our social pages and our Ko-fi on the website.
If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, then please consider leaving a rating and review if you enjoyed the show. Thanks for listening. This has been Evie
and Kat. Bye. Enjoy the rest of the
Olympics.
See you guys.
Have fun having little sleep.